I watched a 19-year-old boy collapse on marble floors while 5 paramedics fought to save him. His lips turned black, his chest heaved, they pumped oxygen into him, but he kept dying because they were treating the wrong problem. I'm just a maid. I wasn't supposed to speak up, but I saw something they missed, something I'd seen once before in a moment that still haunts me. What I did next exposed a 7-year revenge plot and changed everything. My name is Nicole Hines, and 3 months ago I took a job as a maid in a billionaire's mansion. I needed the money. I needed to stay invisible. That's what people like me do. We keep our heads down, do our work, and pretend we don't see things. But when Dominic Hathaway hit the floor that morning, convulsing and gasping while 5 paramedics stood helpless around him, I couldn't stay invisible anymore. His household staff watched with faces too calm, too composed, like they'd been expecting this, like they wanted it. I spotted something in his throat the paramedics missed, a greenish discoloration I'd seen once before, and I realized they were pumping oxygen into a body that couldn't use it anymore. Speaking up meant crossing lines servants don't cross. It meant putting a target on my back. But staying silent meant watching him die. If you want to see what happens when an invisible person finally refuses to stay silent, stay with me, hit that subscribe button and comment where you are watching from, so I made a choice that would shatter every lie in that house. I learned early that people like me are supposed to be furniture, present but invisible, useful but silent. That's what 3 years of housekeeping in Birmingham taught me. Keep your head down, your hands busy, and your thoughts to yourself. The Hathaway estate didn't just teach that lesson, it screamed it. I arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, clutching my reference letter like a life raft. The gates alone could have swallowed my entire childhood home. Beyond them, the mansion sprawled across manicured lawns, all cream stone and endless windows that caught the morning light like they were hoarding it. A woman waited at the service entrance, mid-40s, rail-thin, with blonde hair pulled so tight it looked painful. "Nicole Hines?" Her voice was clipped, efficient. "Yes, ma'am." "Kaylee Swafford, head of household staff." She looked me up and down the way you'd inspect produce. "Mr. Ernest Hathaway expects perfection. We don't tolerate mistakes, laziness, or gossip. Understood?" "Understood." She led me through a maze of corridors, the kind the family never sees. Narrow halls with fluorescent lights, nothing like the chandelier-lit splendor I glimpsed through doorways. We passed a kitchen where 3 women chopped vegetables in synchronized silence. No one looked up. "You'll share quarters with Tristan and Simone," Kaylee said, gesturing to a cramped room with 3 narrow beds. "Staff meals at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. You eat what's prepared when it's prepared. Your assignments will be posted daily." "And the family?" Something flickered across her face. Too quick to read. "Mr. Hathaway is rarely home. Business. His son Dominic lives here full-time." She paused at a window overlooking the garden. "Dominic is autistic, 19 years old. He requires specific handling." The way she said handling made my skin prickle. "What kind of specific?" "He doesn't like loud noises, unexpected touch, changes in routine." Kaylee's jaw tightened. "When you clean his spaces, you follow the schedule exactly. Don't speak to him unless he speaks first. Don't try to help him with anything. Just clean and leave." "That seems... those are the rules." Her eyes locked onto mine, cold and flat. "Mr. Hathaway pays extremely well for discretion and obedience. If you can't manage both, there's a bus back to town every hour." I swallowed the words trying to climb out of my throat. I needed this job. My sister's rent was due. My nephew needed school supplies. I couldn't afford principals. "I can manage." "Good." Kaylee turned sharply, her shoes clicking against marble. "Staff meeting in 10 minutes. Don't be late." She disappeared around a corner, leaving me alone in that narrow hallway. Through a nearby window, I could see the main house, All those beautiful rooms I'd be cleaning, but never truly entering. And somewhere inside, a 19-year-old boy who apparently needed handling instead of care. The prickle on my skin spread to my spine. Something here was wrong. I felt it the way you feel weather changing, that pressure in the air before a storm breaks. But I told myself what I always told myself. Keep your head down, do your work, collect your paycheck. I just didn't know yet how impossible that would become. I met Dominic 3 days later. Kylie had given me the West Wing, Dominic's wing, with instructions so precise they felt like a script. Enter at 9 a.m. exactly. Clean the sitting room first, then the bathroom, then dust the bookshelves. Don't touch anything on his desk. Don't open the curtains unless they're already open. Vacuum only if he's not in the room. He'll probably ignore you, she'd said. That's what we want. But when I pushed the cleaning cart through his door at exactly 9, Dominic wasn't ignoring anything. He sat cross-legged on the floor near the window, surrounded by what looked like hundreds of small wooden blocks arranged in an elaborate pattern. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he placed each piece with deliberate care. He wore a gray hoodie and jeans, and his hands moved with the kind of focus that made the whole world disappear. I froze, unsure whether to announce myself or pretend I wasn't there. He glanced up. His eyes were brown, intense, and completely aware. "You're new." His voice was soft but clear. "Yes, I'm Nicole. I'll just be cleaning, won't bother you." The last person who cleaned always hummed. It made the blocks vibrate wrong. He returned to his pattern. "Do you hum?" "Not while I'm working." "Good." I started with the sitting room, moving quietly, hyper-aware of every sound the duster made. Dominic didn't look up again, but I could feel him tracking me somehow, sensing my presence the way some people sense storms coming. The room was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that looked like paintings. Leather furniture that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. But something about it felt hollow. No photographs, no personal mess. It was a showcase, not a home. I was dusting a bookshelf when I heard his breathing change. Quick, shallow. I turned. Dominic had gone completely still, his eyes fixed on the doorway. His hands hovered over the blocks, trembling slightly. Kaylee stood in the threshold. "Dominic." Her voice was honey-sweet, but something underneath it raised every hair on my neck. "Did you take your medication this morning?" He didn't answer, didn't move. "I asked you a question." "Yes." The word came out strangled. "Yes, what?" His jaw clenched. "Yes, I took it." Kaylee smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "That's good. We wouldn't want another incident like last week, would we? When you forgot and got so confused you broke that lovely lamp." I watched his shoulders curl inward, his whole body shrinking. "I didn't forget. I took it." "Of course you did." She glanced at me. "Nicole, when you're finished here, the study needs attention. 3rd floor." She left, but the air stayed thick with whatever had just happened. Dominic's hands were still shaking. I shouldn't have said anything. Kaylee's rules echoed in my head. Don't speak unless spoken to, just clean and leave. But I watched this 19-year-old boy struggling to steady his breathing, and furniture isn't supposed to notice things like that. People are. "Your pattern," I said quietly. "What is it?" He blinked, like he'd forgotten I was there. "What?" "The blocks. What are you building?" His eyes dropped to the floor, to the elaborate spiral he'd created. The Fibonacci sequence, in 3 dimensions. "That's beautiful." Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Most people think it's weird. Most people don't pay attention to the right things." He looked at me then, really looked. And I saw something I recognized. That careful assessment people do when they're trying to figure out if you're safe. If you're someone who'll hurt them, or someone who might possibly not. I'd worn that same expression most of my life. Nicole? His voice dropped lower. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think... He hesitated, fingers tightening on a block. Do you think someone would hurt a person on purpose but make it look like an accident? My stomach dropped. Why would you ask that? But footsteps echoed in the hallway, sharp, deliberate clicks getting closer. Dominic's face went blank so fast it was like watching a door slam shut. He returned to his blocks, hands moving mechanically now. All that focus replaced by performance. I grabbed my cleaning supplies and moved toward the bathroom, heart hammering. As I passed him, he whispered just loud enough for me to hear. Be careful who you trust here. That night, I couldn't sleep. Dominic's question kept circling through my mind. Do you think someone would hurt a person on purpose but make it look like an accident? At 2 a.m., I gave up and went down to the kitchen for water. The mansion felt different at night. All those beautiful rooms turned into shadows and strange shapes. My footsteps echoed too loud on the marble floors. I was halfway down the servants' staircase when I heard voices. Low, urgent, coming from the storage room near the kitchen. I should have kept walking, should have gone straight back to bed and minded my business the way Kaylee's rules demanded. But Dominic's warning had gotten under my skin, and my feet made the decision before my brain could stop them. I pressed myself against the wall, close enough to hear but hidden in the darkness of the stairwell. Can't keep doing this. That was Tristan, one of my roommates. Her voice shook. What if someone notices? No one's noticed in 7 years. Kaylee's voice was ice cold. No one will notice now. But the maid, Nicole, she was watching today, in his room. She's nobody. She'll learn to keep her head down like everyone else, or she won't last. Silence. Then a man's voice I didn't recognize. What about next week? The dosage? Double it Thursday night. He'll be disoriented enough by Friday morning. Kaylee's shoes clicked against the floor, pacing. His father will be in London. No one will question anything. My hand gripped the railing so hard my knuckles went white. I don't know if I can keep... Tristan started. You'll do what you're told. Kaylee's voice dropped to something venomous. Or have you forgotten what they did to your brother? How Ernest Hathaway's father destroyed your family's shop and left you with nothing? This is justice, Tristan. This is making them pay. By hurting a kid who had nothing to do with it? He's a Hathaway. That's enough. Footsteps moved toward the door. I ran. Back up the stairs, my heart trying to explode through my ribs, my mind racing faster than my feet. I made it to my room and slipped under the covers just as I heard someone moving through the corridor below. Tristan came in 10 minutes later. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, pretending to sleep while she undressed in the darkness. I heard her crying, soft, muffled sounds she tried to hide. In the morning, I'd have to decide what to do with what I'd heard. But lying there in the dark, one thing was already crystal clear. Whatever was happening in this house, it was bigger than Kaylee's cruelty or Tristan's reluctant participation. This was planned, coordinated, something 7 years in the making. And Dominic, vulnerable, aware, trapped in his own home, was their target. Double it Thursday night. Thursday was tomorrow. I'd come here to be invisible, to keep my head down and collect my paycheck. I'd spent my whole life perfecting the art of not getting involved. But if I stayed silent now, I'd be watching a 19-year-old boy get hurt, maybe worse, and doing nothing to stop it. Furniture doesn't make choices. People do. And somewhere between arriving at these gates and hearing that conversation, I'd stopped being willing to pretend I was just furniture. Thursday night, I barely slept. Friday morning, I showed up to Dominic's wing 30 minutes early. Kaylee found me in the hallway. You're not scheduled until 9. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd get a head start. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for something. I kept it blank. the way I'd learned to keep every expression blank when people with power were watching. Fine, but stay out of his way. She left, and I slipped inside. Dominic sat at his desk, staring at a textbook but not really reading. His hands trembled slightly. His skin looked too pale, almost gray. "Hey," I said softly. He glanced up, and I saw it immediately. His pupils were wrong, too dilated, unfocused. "Nicole," my name came out slurred. Everything's moving weird." "What did you take this morning?" "Just my medication, same as always." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "But it feels wrong, like my brain's disconnecting." I moved closer. "Show me the pills." He fumbled in his desk drawer and pulled out an orange prescription bottle. I read the label. The dosage was double what it should be for someone his size. And there was something else. A faint residue on the pills that didn't look right. "Dominic, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He nodded, but his head kept moving, like he couldn't quite stop the motion. "Don't take any more of these. Tell me, where's your father?" "London. Back Sunday?" 3 days. They had 3 days to do whatever they'd planned. "Okay, I need you to—" Dominic's body went rigid, his back arched, his hands clawed at his throat, his mouth opened but no sound came out except this horrible gasping, like his lungs had forgotten how to work. "Dominic!" He collapsed onto the floor, convulsing. His eyes rolled back, his lips started turning blue. I screamed for help and dropped beside him, trying to remember every first aid class I'd ever taken. Check his airway, make sure he's breathing. But he wasn't breathing, not really. His chest heaved, but nothing was getting through. Footsteps thundered through the house. Suddenly the room filled with people. Kaylee, Tristan, 2 gardeners, the cook. Someone called 911. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. 5 of them. Blue uniforms swarming around Dominic's seizing body, oxygen masks, monitors, needles. They worked with practiced efficiency, but I watched their faces shift from confidence to confusion to something close to panic. His O2 sat is dropping. Airways clear, but he's not responding to oxygen. Possible overdose? Allergic reaction? We're losing him. The household staff stood in a cluster near the door. I looked at their faces, really looked. Kaylee's expression was blank, neutral, almost bored. Tristan stared at the floor, tears streaming down her face. The others watched with the kind of detached curiosity you'd give a mildly interesting TV show. No panic, no horror, no desperation. They'd been expecting this. And suddenly I saw it. The same thing I'd seen 6 years ago when my neighbor's son had collapsed at a barbecue. That greenish-gray tint inside Dominic's mouth. That specific discoloration that meant his body wasn't just failing to breathe. It couldn't process oxygen anymore. "He's been poisoned," I heard myself say. Every head turned toward me. The lead paramedic looked up. "What?" "Carbon monoxide or something that blocks oxygen absorption. You can pump oxygen into him all day. It won't help. His blood can't carry it." "Ma'am, we're trained professionals." "Then why is he dying?" Silence. The monitor's alarm screamed into the void, and I made a choice that would either save his life or end mine. I pushed past the paramedics and dropped to my knees beside Dominic. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "Methylene blue." The words came out hard, certain. "He needs methylene blue or he's dead in 3 minutes." The lead paramedic, a woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, stared at me. "How do you know that?" "Because I watched someone die from methemoglobinemia when I was 17. I watched trained professionals do exactly what you're doing, and it didn't work. Not until someone who actually knew what they were looking at showed up." She hesitated. 1 second. 2. Dominic's lips were almost black now. "We don't carry methylene blue in the rig," she said. "Hospital's 12 minutes out." "He doesn't have 12 minutes. "Then what do you suggest?" My mind raced. Methylene blue was the antidote, but without it. Hyperbaric oxygen, or I looked at Dominic's desk, at the chemistry textbooks stacked there. Does he have a lab? Any kind of chemistry setup? Third floor, Kaylee said from behind me. Her voice was tight, controlled. But it's locked. Then unlock it. I don't have the key. Only Mr. Hathaway. Break the door. I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her take a step back. Break it now, or explain to Ernest why you let his son die when there might have been something that could save him. For a moment, I thought she'd refuse. I saw the calculation in her eyes, weighing options, measuring risks. Then one of the gardeners, a man named Malachi, pushed past her and ran for the stairs. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house 2 minutes later. I sprinted up 3 flights, the paramedics right behind me. Dominic's lab was small but well equipped, beakers, Bunsen burners, and rows of carefully labeled chemicals. There, I pointed to a locked cabinet. Medical supplies. Another door broken. Inside, organized with the kind of precision only Dominic would use, were vials and syringes, bandages and medications, and methylene blue. We ran back down. The female paramedic took the vial from my shaking hands, checked the label twice, and drew up a dose with the kind of speed that comes from years of emergency medicine. If you're wrong about this, I'm not. She administered it through his IV. Nobody breathed. 30 seconds passed. 45. The monitor kept shrieking. Then, slowly, impossibly, color started returning to Dominic's lips. His oxygen saturation ticked up. 72%, 78%, 85%. His chest rose and fell more naturally. His eyelids fluttered. "Oh my God," one of the younger paramedics whispered. The lead paramedic looked at me with something between respect and disbelief. "What did you say your name was?" "Nicole Hines." "Nicole Hines just saved this kid's life." She turned to her team. "Let's get him stabilized for transport. I want him monitored every second until we reach the hospital." They worked quickly now, their earlier panic replaced with focused competence. Within minutes, they had Dominic on a stretcher, hooked to portable monitors, ready to move. As they carried him past me, his eyes opened briefly, found mine. "Thank you," he mouthed. Then they were gone, sirens wailing into the morning air. And I was left standing in that beautiful room with the household staff, all of them staring at me like I'd just set off a bomb. Kylie stepped forward. Her smile was thin, dangerous. "That was quite impressive, Nicole. Where exactly did you learn about methemoglobinemia?" The way she said it, so casual, so curious, made my blood run cold. Because that wasn't gratitude in her voice. It was a threat. She was asking, "How much do you know? How much have you figured out?" And we both understood that my answer would determine whether I walked out of this house alive. I didn't answer Kylie's question. "I need some air," I said, and walked out before she could stop me. My hands didn't start shaking until I reached the garden. Then they shook so hard I had to sit on a stone bench and press them between my knees to make them stop. I'd just saved Dominic's life. I'd also just painted a target on my back the size of Birmingham. Kaylee knew I understood what had happened. And if she knew, the others knew. Whatever plan they'd spent 7 years building, I'd just thrown a wrench into it big enough to break bones. The question was, what would they do about it? I stayed in the garden until my breathing steadied, then went back inside through the kitchen entrance. Tristan was there alone, washing dishes with mechanical precision. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Tristan," she flinched, dropping a plate. It shattered against the tile. "I'm sorry," she whispered, staring at the broken pieces. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" "You don't understand. You don't know what they did? Then tell me. She looked up, and the desperation in her face nearly broke me. I can't. If I tell you, they'll. She stopped, glancing toward the hallway. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. The basement. Tonight. 2 a.m. Door behind the wine cellar. Tristan, I can't be seen talking to you. She gathered the broken plate with shaking hands. Please, just be careful. She left before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day cleaning rooms I barely saw, my mind running through possibilities. At 1:45 a.m., I crept downstairs, past the wine cellar with its rows of bottles that probably cost more than my car, to a narrow door I'd never noticed before. It wasn't locked. The stairs leading down were steep and dark. I used my phone's flashlight, each step creaking under my weight loud enough to wake the dead. The air grew colder as I descended, carrying the smell of old stone and something else. Something chemical. The basement was vast. Storage rooms branched off in multiple directions, filled with furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts. I moved through them carefully, listening for any sound. Then I found it. A room at the very back, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, documents, all of it organized with obsessive precision around a single event. A land seizure. 14 years ago. The headline read, Hathaway Development acquires prime commercial property, local businesses displaced. The photograph showed a small shop, modest, clearly family-owned, with a hand-painted sign that read, Swafford Hardware and Goods. In front of it stood a man, a woman, and 3 children. The youngest, a girl about 8 years old, had blonde hair and defiant eyes. Kaylee. I moved closer, reading the articles. The Hathaway Corporation, under Ernest's father Richard, had purchased the entire block for a luxury development. The businesses were given 30 days to vacate. Compensation was minimal, far below market value. Several families lost everything. The Swafford family shop had been there for 3 generations. More clippings, a lawsuit filed by the Swaffords, dismissed, an appeal, denied. The Hathaway lawyers had buried them in legal fees until they had nothing left. Then, 2 years after the eviction, another article. Local man dies in industrial accident. James Swafford, Kylie's father. He'd been working at a factory, taking any job he could find after losing the shop. The accident report called it operator error, but handwritten notes in the margins told a different story. Faulty equipment, no safety protocols, witnesses silenced. The factory was owned by a Hathaway subsidiary. My stomach turned. Tucked behind the articles was a timeline. Written in Kylie's precise handwriting, age 15, father dies, mother breaks down, family scattered. Age 18, graduate early, begin planning. Age 19, change name, create new identity. Age 20, apply for position at Hathaway Estate. Age 22, recruit Tristan, factory accident brother, and Blake, business destroyed, lawsuit dismissed. Age 22, present. Phase 1, establish trust. Phase 2, systematic destabilization. Phase 3. The rest was torn off, but I didn't need to read it to understand. This wasn't just revenge. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy the Hathaway family from the inside. And Dominic, vulnerable, innocent Dominic, was their weapon of choice. Hurt him enough, and Ernest would come home. Make him suffer, and his father would suffer too. 7 years of planning. 7 years of hatred burning so hot it consumed everything else. You weren't supposed to find this. I spun around. Kaylee stood in the doorway, and she wasn't alone. Blake Broussard, one of the drivers, blocked the other exit. Behind him, 2 more staff members I recognized from the garden crew. I'm guessing you have questions, Kaylee said, her voice eerily calm. My phone was in my pocket, but there was no signal down here. No way to call for help. 4 of them. One of me. And nobody knew where I was. Your father, I said, buying time. What happened to him wasn't Dominic's fault. He was 5 years old. No, but he's a Hathaway. Kaylee moved closer, and I saw something fractured in her eyes. Something that had broken a long time ago and never healed right. Do you know what it's like to watch your father work himself to death because people with money decided your family didn't matter? To watch your mother give up on living because the legal system protects the rich and crushes everyone else? So you decided to become exactly what you hate. Her hand lashed out so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap split my lip. You don't get to judge me. You're just like us. Invisible, disposable. The only difference is you haven't figured out yet that playing by their rules means you'll always lose. And hurting Dominic is winning? It's justice. It's murder. The room went silent. Blake shifted uncomfortably. One of the gardeners looked away. Not murder, Kaylee said softly. Just evening the scales. But you've complicated things, Nicole. You saved him today. That makes you a problem. So what now? You kill me too? No. She smiled, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. We make sure you understand what happens when servants forget their place. She nodded to Blake. He moved toward me, and I realized I was about to find out exactly how far their revenge was willing to go. Blake grabbed my arm, but before he could do anything else, a voice cut through the basement like a gunshot. Let her go! Tristan stood at the top of the stairs, her phone held out in front of her, screen glowing. I've been recording for the last 3 minutes. Everything you just said. Everything Nicole found. It's uploading right now to a cloud account none of you can access. Kaylee's face went white. Tristan, what are you— I'm done. Tristan's voice cracked, but she didn't lower the phone. I'm done letting hatred turn me into something my brother would be ashamed of. He died in that factory, yes. That was wrong. But this? She gestured at the room, at me, at all of it. This is worse. We became the monsters we were trying to punish. Your brother would hate what we've done. Colton was kind. He believed in justice, not revenge. And we've spent 7 years spitting on his memory by terrorizing an innocent kid who never hurt anyone. Blake released my arm. I stumbled backward, tasting blood from my split lip. You're throwing away everything we built, Kaylee said, and for the first time I heard something other than cold calculation in her voice. Desperation. I'm trying to save what's left of my soul. Tristan looked at me. Nicole, get out. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran up those stairs, Tristan right behind me, her phone still recording. Behind us, I heard Kaylee screaming, rage and grief and 7 years of poisonous planning collapsing all at once. We made it to the main floor. The mansion was dark and silent, everyone else asleep. Where's Dominic? Tristan asked, breathing hard. Hospital. They were keeping him overnight for observation. Good. That's good. She grabbed my shoulders. Listen to me. Ernest is flying back tomorrow morning. You need to show him everything before Kaylee can spin this. The basement room, the evidence, all of it. She'll run. Maybe. But at least Dominic will be safe. Tristan's eyes filled with tears. I should have stopped this months ago. When I saw how scared he was, how they were systematically breaking him down, I told myself it was justice. But I knew it was wrong. Why did you help me tonight? Because you did what I couldn't. She wiped her eyes roughly. You saw someone suffering and you actually did something about it. You didn't calculate the cost or weigh the benefits. You just helped, like it was the simplest thing in the world. It hadn't felt simple. It had felt terrifying. But maybe that's what courage actually was. Doing the right thing even when every instinct screamed at you to stay quiet and stay safe. What happens to you now? I asked. I'll face whatever comes. Criminal charges, probably. I deserve them. She pulled out her phone. I'm sending you the recording. Keep it safe. Make sure Ernest sees it. My phone buzzed with the file transfer. If you're wondering what happens when silence finally breaks, when truth becomes louder than fear, stay with me. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Tristan, go, before they realize I'm not on their side anymore. I ran to my room, locked the door, and spent the rest of the night sitting against it with my phone clutched in my hand, jumping at every sound. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Hines? A man's voice, deep and exhausted. This is Ernest Hathaway. The hospital called me about Dominic. They said you saved his life. My throat tightened. Is he okay? He's stable. Awake. Asking for you, actually. A pause. I'm landing in 3 hours. I need to speak with you immediately. Dominic told me. He told me things have been happening. Things he was afraid to tell me before. Mr. Hathaway, there's something you need to know. I know. He told me someone's been hurting him, systematically, for months. His voice broke. I should have seen it. I should have been there. But I was too focused on the business, on maintaining the legacy my father built, and I nearly lost my son because of it. It's more complicated than that. Then explain it to me. All of it. Whatever's happening in my house, I want to know. I took a breath. You should probably sit down first. I'm in a taxi from the airport. Just talk. So I did. I told him about the basement, the photographs, the timeline, Kaylee's real identity and her father's death, the 7-year revenge plot, the poisoning, Tristan's confession, all of it. The line went silent for so long I thought he'd hung up. Mr. Hathaway? My father. His voice was barely a whisper. I knew he was ruthless in business. I knew he'd made enemies. But I never asked the right questions. Never looked at the casualties left behind while he built his empire. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? He laughed, bitter and hollow. I inherited everything he built. The money, the property, the company, all of it stained with decisions like the one that destroyed the Swafford family. I just never bothered to see the stains. What are you going to do? First, I'm calling the police. Kaylee and the others need to face legal consequences. Attempted murder isn't something I can handle privately. But after that? He was quiet for a moment. After that, I'm going to figure out how to make this right. If that's even possible. It might not be. Not for everyone. I know. But I have to try. The sound of a car door opening. I'm here. Meet me in my office in 20 minutes. And Ms. Hines? Yes? Thank you for protecting my son when I failed to. I owe you more than I can ever repay. He hung up. I stared at my phone, at the recording Tristan had sent me, at all the evidence of how broken people could become when the system failed them badly enough. Then I got dressed and prepared to face whatever came next. Because the truth was finally coming out, and sometimes that's the only justice that matters. Ernest Hathaway's office was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined dark wood and intimidating furniture, the kind of space designed to make people feel small. Instead, it was filled with light, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, photographs of Dominic at different ages covering one entire wall, and books stacked everywhere with the kind of chaos that comes from actually reading them. Ernest stood by the window when I entered. Mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit that looked like he'd slept in it, dark hair graying at the temples. He turned when he heard me, and the exhaustion in his face made him look a decade older. Ms. Hines, please sit. I perched on the edge of a leather chair. My cleaned uniform suddenly feeling ridiculous in this space where real decisions got made. The police are on their way, he said, sitting across from me. I've sent them everything you told me. They'll want your statement and Tristan's recording. He rubbed his face. Kylie and 2 others fled sometime early this morning. Blake and the gardeners stayed. They're in their quarters now, waiting. What about Tristan? She's cooperating fully. Her lawyer is arguing for leniency given her assistance in stopping the final attack. He paused. It won't erase what she was part of, but it might mean the difference between years and decades. Silence settled between us. Outside, birds sang like nothing had changed. I need to ask you something, Ernest said finally. And I need you to be honest. Did Dominic ever try to tell me? About what was happening? The question hit like a punch. I thought about Dominic's careful distance with his father, the way he always seemed to be performing normalcy rather than living it. I think he tried, I said carefully, in his own way. But Mr. Hathaway, when was the last time you had an actual conversation with him? Not about medications or routines or whether he ate breakfast. A real conversation where you asked what he was feeling and then stayed long enough to hear the answer? His face crumpled. I can't remember. He needed you to see him, not as a responsibility or a problem to manage, as a person. I thought I was protecting him by building something stable, by maintaining the business my father built so Dominic would always be secure. Ernest's voice broke. But I was so focused on the legacy that I never questioned what that legacy was built on. How many families like the Swaffords did my father destroy? How many people lost everything so we could have more? You didn't know. I didn't ask. He stood, pacing to the window. That's not the same as not knowing. I had the resources to investigate, to make amends, to at least acknowledge the harm, but it was easier to just accept the inheritance and move on. I thought about Kaylee's fractured eyes, about the girl in that photograph standing in front of her family's shop with defiant hope, about how that hope had curdled into something toxic when no one in power bothered to care about her family's suffering. What happened to them was wrong, I said, but what they did to Dominic was wrong too. Both things can be true. Can they? He turned to face me. Or is what happened to Dominic just the inevitable consequence of my father's cruelty? Karma finally catching up? Dominic isn't karma. He's a 19-year-old kid who never hurt anyone. I know. God, I know. He sank back into his chair. The police will handle the criminal charges. But that's not enough. It doesn't address the root cause. The Swafford family lost everything, and the legal system protected us because we had money and they didn't. That's not justice. That's just power protecting power. So what are you going to do? Ernest pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. Inside were financial documents, property deeds, corporate records. I've been going through my father's files since you called. The Swafford case wasn't unique. Over 30 years, his developments displaced hundreds of families. Most received inadequate compensation. Many never recovered financially. He spread the documents across the desk. I'm establishing a reparations fund, full market value compensation for every family that was underpaid, plus interest, plus an additional amount for damages and suffering. That's going to cost millions, maybe tens of millions. I don't care. He looked at me with something fierce in his eyes. My father built an empire on other people's suffering. I'm not going to keep profiting from it. Kaylee's family will receive full compensation plus a formal public apology. I can't bring back her father, and I can't undo 14 years of pain. But I can at least acknowledge what happened and try to make material amends. He paused. I'm also implementing new protocols for all Hathaway business dealings. Independent oversight, fair market compensation for any acquisitions, transparency in all transactions. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with the distant figure Dominic had described. Why? I asked. You could have just handled the criminal charges and moved on, protected your reputation. Because my son almost died yesterday, and the only reason he didn't is because you, someone I'm paying poverty wages to clean my house, cared more about his life than the people I'd hired specifically to care for him." Ernest's voice was raw. "That's a failure so profound I can't ignore it. And if I'm capable of that kind of blindness about my own son, how blind have I been to everything else?" The door opened. A police officer entered, followed by two detectives. "Mr. Hathaway, we're ready to take statements." The next 3 hours were a blur of questions, recorded testimonies, and police moving through the mansion collecting evidence. Kaylee's basement room was photographed and catalogued. Blake and the Gardners were taken into custody. Tristan sat in the library with her lawyer, her face empty of everything except exhaustion. By afternoon, the mansion felt like a crime scene. Yellow tape, officers in every hallway. The beautiful rooms suddenly exposed as the stage for something ugly. Dominic came home at 4 p.m., Ernest driving him personally. I watched from a window as Ernest helped his son out of the car, the first time I'd seen him actually touch Dominic with anything resembling tenderness. They stopped in the garden. Ernest said something. Dominic looked up at him surprised. Then Ernest hugged him. Really hugged him. And Dominic, who supposedly didn't like unexpected touch, held on like he was drowning, and his father was the only solid thing in the world. Something in my chest cracked open. Maybe people could change. Maybe awareness was the first step toward
3 weeks
actually
later,
being better.
Ernest called a meeting
Maybe
in
there
the
was
main
hope
sitting
after
room.
all. It wasn't just me, it was everyone. The remaining staff who'd had nothing to do with the conspiracy, Dominic, Ernest's lawyers, and, via video call, Tristan Martins, speaking from a facility where she was awaiting trial. "I've asked you all here because you deserve to know what happens next," Ernest began. He looked different, still exhausted, but more present somehow, like he'd woken up from a long sleep. First, the legal situation. Kaylee Swafford and her two accomplices are still at large, but authorities in 3 countries are actively searching. Blake Broussard and the others who participated have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, assault, and related crimes. Trials will proceed over the next several months. He glanced at the screen where Tristan sat, her face pale but composed. Tristan has cooperated fully with law enforcement. Her attorney is negotiating a plea deal that will likely result in reduced charges in exchange for her testimony. She'll face consequences, that's non-negotiable, but the prosecution recognizes that she also helped stop the final attack. Tristan nodded slightly, her eyes downcast. Ernest continued. "Second, and more importantly, I need to address what allowed this to happen. My father's business practices were ruthless and often cruel. He displaced families, destroyed livelihoods, and used the legal system as a weapon against people who couldn't fight back. The Swafford family was one of many who suffered. I inherited that legacy without questioning it, and that makes me complicit." He pulled out a document, his hands not quite steady. "I'm establishing the James Swafford Memorial Fund with an initial endowment of $15 million. Its purpose is threefold: provide full compensation to families displaced by Hathaway developments, offer legal support to individuals fighting corporate abuse, and fund programs that help small businesses survive economic displacement." One of the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hathaway, the financial implications are significant. I know, I don't care." Ernest's voice was firm. "I'm also liquidating several properties and investments to fund direct reparations. Every family that received inadequate compensation will receive what they should have gotten originally, adjusted for inflation plus damages." "That's extraordinary," someone murmured. "It's the bare minimum." Ernest looked directly at the camera, at Tristan. "Ms. Martins, I cannot undo what my father did to your family. I cannot bring back your brother Colton or erase the years of suffering you experienced. But I can publicly acknowledge the harm, compensate you fairly, and ensure it doesn't happen to others. My lawyers will contact you regarding the specifics, but you and your mother will receive full restitution." Tristan's face crumpled. She covered it with her hands, shoulders shaking. "I don't expect forgiveness," Ernest continued quietly. "What happened to you and Kaylee and all the others, that was real trauma, real injustice. You had every right to be angry, but—" His voice caught. "My son is innocent. And when pain turns into a weapon aimed at innocent people, everyone loses." He turned to face the room. "Third, this household is changing. I'm hiring an independent HR consultant to review all employment practices, wages, and working conditions. Everyone deserves fair compensation, respectful treatment, and the ability to speak up without fear. That includes protection for whistleblowers." He looked at me. "Nicole, you risked everything to protect Dominic. That's not something any employee should have to do, but I'm grateful you did. I'm offering you a permanent position, not as a maid, but as Dominic's personal advocate and companion. Tripled salary, full benefits, and the authority to make decisions regarding his care." My mouth fell open. You don't have to answer now. Think about it." He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "But I hope you'll stay. Dominic trusts you." "That's rare and precious." Across the room, Dominic sat in his usual corner, but he wasn't arranging blocks or staring at textbooks. He was watching his father with something cautious and new in his expression. Hope. Ernest walked over and sat beside him. Not hovering, not managing, just sitting. "I'm sorry," he said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I let work become more important than you." "You're here now," Dominic said quietly. "I am, and I'm not leaving again." They sat together in comfortable silence, and I realized this was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not instant, but real. The meeting ended shortly after. People filtered out, conversations buzzing with shock and speculation about everything that had changed. I stayed behind, watching father and son talk about something, chemistry maybe, or the Fibonacci sequence Dominic loved. Ernest listened like every word mattered. "Nicole," Dominic called out, "can you come here?" I walked over. "My dad says you might stay. Will you?" I looked at this 19-year-old who'd survived something that should have broken him, at his father, who'd finally woken up to his own blindness, at the mansion that had been a beautiful prison and might become something better. "Yeah," I said. "I'll stay." Dominic smiled, a real unguarded smile that lit up his whole face. "Good. Because I'm teaching you about fractals next week, and you can't escape now." Ernest laughed, and it was such a surprising sound that both Dominic and I stared at him. "What?" he said. "Am I not allowed to find my son funny?" "You never laughed before," Dominic observed. "Then I have a lot of catching up to do." That evening, I stood in the garden as the sun set, painting everything gold and purple. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Billionaire Ernest Hathaway announces major reparations fund for families displaced by corporate development. The article detailed everything: the Swafford case, the memorial fund, the policy changes. Comments flooded in. Some praised his accountability. Others called it too little, too late. Some accused him of buying good PR. Maybe they were all right. But sitting in that garden, watching through the window as Ernest patiently helped Dominic with something at the kitchen table, both of them actually present, actually connecting, I thought maybe the truth was simpler. People could change. Not perfectly, not without cost, but genuinely. And sometimes, the most radical thing you could do was admit you were wrong, take responsibility, and actually try to be better. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tristan. "Thank you, for everything. For being brave when I couldn't be." I texted back, "Thank you for helping me when it mattered most." Another buzz, this time from Ernest. "Dinner in 20 minutes. Dominic insists you join us. Fair warning, he's explaining quantum mechanics and won't stop until you understand it." I smiled. 3 weeks ago, I'd been invisible furniture trying to survive. Now I was part of something messy and complicated and real. Not all heroes wore fancy costumes. Sometimes they just showed up, paid attention, and refused to look away when it would have been easier. Sometimes that was enough. This story started with a young man fighting for breath and a maid who refused to stay silent. If you believe in second chances, real accountability, and the courage it takes to speak truth to power, subscribe and share this. Because stories like this remind us that change is possible when enough people decide to care. I walked inside to join them for dinner, ready for whatever came next.